Hello, good afternoon, everyone. How are you doing today? Great. Thank you so much for joining us, both at Trailhead DX and also joining our session. Today, we are going to talk about how to plug in your external service connectors to any RESTful APIs. First of all, I'm going to do a quick poll. How many of you have heard about external services or have used it in the past? Awesome. Thank you. And a second poll, how many of you have used Flow or heard about Flow? Awesome, that's great. Then we don't need to prime you on what Flow is during our session. Today, as you see, we have 4 speakers. I am Xintong Zhang. I work as product manager for Lightning Platform. And joining with me today are Jody, Thomas, and Akash. I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
I'm here all the way from Melbourne, Australia. I am an independent Salesforce consultant partner, and I'm also a Salesforce MVP and Salesforce user group leader.
Hey, I'm Thomas Pollinger, so I'm working as an engineer on external objects amongst external services, data import, and there must be some other thing, named credentials as well, so anything that has to do with platform integration.
Hey everyone, I'm Akash Thakur, and I'm an engineer on the external services feature.
Thank you all for joining me, and it's an honor to have you here, Jody. Before we get started, I'm going to show you the most famous slide for today. Please make your purchasing decision based on the generally available product, because we are going to touch on the some pilot features today. We would make it clear when we got to there. Please keep in mind that these pilot features might or might not go GA in the future. And here's the agenda. Jody and myself will talk about the product overview and also the use cases. Thomas and Akash will show a deeper dive and a demo for the product. We would conclude with a roadmap and Q&A. First of all, what is the problem that we are solving? Most of the business today are running their business in various of applications, from CRM to ERP, from public cloud to proprietary systems, and even within Salesforce ecosystem itself, you might run various applications hosted in MuleSoft, Heroku, or Marketing Cloud. Your customers are expecting a seamless experience from your products, which means that you would need to bring various applications together in order to connect these dots and make your CRM context aware. How would you approach it? Traditionally, you could write Apex code, and then that would require developer skills to do so, but you could do that pretty well. And with external service, what we're doing is we are empowering admins. These admins who don't love coding or who don't know how to code, they can still set up these integrations with any external RESTful APIs. I would love to make a comparison between external service and Salesforce Connect, who both are major ways of declaratively integrating with external systems. If you're familiar with Salesforce Connect, it unlocks your external data declaratively inside of Salesforce experience. And similarly, external service, it unlocks your external processes, such as you want to check a user profile from LinkedIn API, or you want to check the pricing of a car from MuleSoft API. With external service, you can leverage these external API functionalities inside of Salesforce Flow Builder as if they're native functionalities hosted in Salesforce Core. How cool is that? With that, I'm going to give you a more deeper comparison between different integration ways. As I talked about, Salesforce provides you multiple ways to integrate with external systems. A traditional way would be a developer come in, build out the integration in Apex code. The developer would need to code up in Apex, write tests for these Apex code, and then maintain that code for the infinite time of life cycle for that code. It is doable, and it works pretty well in many cases for the developers to come up with integrations, but it requires developer skills, and it's a lot of heavy lifting up front before that you could actually use out this integration in production. In order to simplify that process and to truly empower admins to build out the integration, we GA'd external service back in summer 18 release. This screen, it's already GA, it's in the current product, you can go try it out. And then the purpose of today's session is we are introducing a pilot enhancement that we introduced in summer 19 release. This new version of external service, my team will talk about what is the benefits of it and how to leverage it. Basically, for the purpose of now, I'm just going to give you a primer of how external service works. And the way it works is the same between the current GA version and the pilot version that we are going to introduce. Basically, an admin would come in and get the API definition of any RESTful APIs, copy and paste that API inside of external service, and then we behind scene will automatically generate these call out actions and make them available in your Flow builder. So if you are familiar with Flow, you know that there are actions that you could drag and drop on the canvas to customize your business process. And then we are automatically creating this external service called actions for you. So by registering that schema, you have them available for you. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Jody. She's going to talk about both the benefits of the product and the use case.
Thanks. So external services uses industry standards to describe the REST APIs. It's called OpenID or Swagger format. So we'll use those names interchangeably. So the Swagger definition is written in such a way that both humans and computers can read what it needs to do. So really easily readable by us as to what the API is able to do, and it's readable by the computer to tell the computer what to do. The Swagger definition includes all of the paths that we need to work on and all of the actions and methods that path exposes. If the Swagger definition file that you get, or the Swagger definition that you get from your developer, API developer, is not quite right for you, there are really easy low-code tools that you can modify the Swagger definition file with. By using the three-step process that we're going to see today, we can use the definition that we've got provided by the API developer, and external services will do the heavy lifting to automatically create the Apex code and the paths, and then those methods will be exposed in Flow Builder. And Thomas and Akash will show you how to put those three things together in the demo. So this really makes external services a really simple, easy way to get your integrations up and running very quickly. The Swagger definition tells us what the API needs, and the code is generated automatically. And we as the admins have the knowledge of how our business works and what is needed by the API, how to get our data from Salesforce into the API or from the API into our Salesforce. So we can leverage flows and really build out that business process to make it work for us. And like all flows, the flow can be highly interactive and take the end user through a series of steps, or it can be an auto-launch flow which is triggered on a record creation or deletion or editing. And as we know, the business needs change and business processes might need to be updated. So we can, using Flow, we can change that business process really quickly. Say there was a legislative change and you need to quickly get that process changed because the API has changed. Because it's in Flow, we can quickly and easily change it to meet our business processes. Do you want to go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So there are a few main use cases for external services, such as integrating with proprietary systems and third-party APIs, or government and public APIs, and even other Salesforce APIs. So some examples of some integrations might be updating a single account record with key details from an external system, such as how much money is owing by them, or when their next delivery is planned, so that that information is there when you're ready to make a call to that account. Or how about creating an order in an external ordering system, and when the opportunity is closed won? With external services, we can send over both the opportunity and the opportunity line items in one API call, which we haven't previously been able to do without custom code. So there's also an ever-expanding set of public, open source and government data sources from all levels of government all around the world. And this data can add really valuable extra data to your Salesforce org. So it might be something like updating key demographic information about your account, such as the local government area, county, school district, or even the latest weather information or public health warnings, depending on what your account data needs. Or what about validating a business registration or licensing information against a government data source before you place an order? That's really another good business use case. Or your business may have a custom service written in Heroku for discount codes and coupons. And so on the close one of the opportunity, you may call out to that external services to generate a discount code and then send an email with their coupon. So once you start seeing what APIs are available out there and what processes that you are doing manually that could be more automated using an API, you'll start to see the value that using external services can provide to your business. So over to Akash now, who will show us a demo.
Hey folks, so we're going to spend the next 20 minutes or so walking you through a demo, an end-to-end flow that demonstrates the power of external services, and then we'll delve a little deeper into the setup and configuration for it. So I'll start with the demo. The use case at hand that I want to paint is, imagine a customer dealing with a car buying service, which allows you to do three things. It allows you to trade in your current car, pick a new car, and finally pay for the car. And so what we have here is, this is powered by Salesforce Flow, and underneath it, it leverages external services to make callouts to three different APIs. The CarMax API for trading in your current car. There are proprietary APIs that are exposed through MuleSoft, which help you check the inventory and price of the new car. And then finally, there's the FICO API that you can use for your payment system. So let's walk through this. This is a pre-created flow using communities. So this is the screen the customer gets to when it loads. There we go. And they can customize what car they want. So in step one, they get to enter the details of their current car. And what it'll essentially do is make a call out to the CarMax APIs in the back to get what the value of your current car is. We didn't make a sacrifice to the demo gods. There we go. So we've pre-filled some values in. And so in the step one, basically, you've entered your values for what your current car is. And what it's doing is making a call out to the CarMax API and returning to you what your car's value is. On the next screen, we'll essentially design a new car, choose a model, a color, the battery range, and there are a few other options. I'll keep this simple. And so this is calling the MuleSoft APIs we've exposed, and it's getting you the price of the new car you've chosen. And finally, in the last step, we're going to go through and try to finance a loan. And this is essentially going to call the FICO API with some preset values. And what it'll return is what your current loan looks like, what the monthly payments are, and so forth and so on. So what I wanted to demo with this essentially is it's a rather simplified flow, but what we're trying to show is how you can configure a flow using external services, and it'll make callouts to live APIs in the back. Now, before we go into the configuration and setup, and I pass it on to Thomas, I want to talk about something Jody alluded to earlier, which is OpenAPI, or interchangeably called Swagger. And that's a way of declaring what your API is and defining it. So I'm going to walk in and do a comparison. So on the left here, I'm going to pick the APIs from the second step, the MuleSoft APIs. So what you have on the left here is the endpoint that we were calling, right? This is the host name. We're calling the inventory service with some preset values in the query. And it's a get call. What we return back is a 200 OK status. And the response is a JSON object with 3 fields, price, status, and the ETA. So let's walk through how this translates into a Swagger schema, right? So on the right, you see the Swagger schema. Now, every Swagger schema starts with the keyword Swagger. 2.0 is the version of Swagger that we're currently supporting in this enhanced pilot. Then you move on to the paths. So you define your path, and we have /inventory. So that's the first path, and it makes a get call. So that's the verb there. You can define an n number of paths there, one after another, in comma-separated values. And next, we have 2 query params, color and autopilot. Autopilot can be true or false. Color just takes a string. So next, we define what the input parameters are in the form of a list. So you see here the name is color. Here the name's autopilot. The type of autopilot is a Boolean because it's true or false. Color is just a string. And there are a bunch of other descriptors on this that help you define it further. The Swagger website has a bunch of resources that do a really good job of walking you through what those options could be. And finally now, we come to the responses. So we got a 200 OK with a JSON response. So we define that in the responses section of the schema, where we denote it with what the status code is first, and then what type of response we accept. So you could expect just a plain string here, like a primitive return type. In this case, it's an object, so we mark it as type object. And it has 3 properties, price, status, and ETA, which each further have their own types and their own descriptors on it. So in the next part, Thomas is going to take a similar schema, but a little more complex version, and walk you all through how to set up and configure external services in your Salesforce org.
Hi. Thanks, Akash. So let's try to see how that looks like from, we saw the community user. Let's see now how that would look like from admin's perspective. So I have prepared here the setup screen that I think is pretty familiar with to you. And so what I'm going to do first is, when you're talking to a service, you have to define first its path and endpoint on the host to what you want to talk to, and also the authentication scheme. So that you're doing with named credentials. So the first step that you're doing is creating a named credential. And so I already have set up here one, so I'm going to show that more in detail. So as an example, we have here the MuleSoft service that Akash mentioned before, which is the car inventory. So this is the MuleSoft that you have exposed through a Swagger or a RAML endpoint, and that's the one that you're going to talk to. And the important part here, we have set that up as anonymous, so you set it up as anonymous here too, but you also have to make sure that the authentication section matches up. So I'm going to show a little bit more about that later on with various schemas. So the next step, once you have that set up, you create your external service. So the external service is here. I'm going to showcase, so I have here an external service which represents that car inventory service. And I'm going to talk about that more in detail later, about all the sections. So just going to copy that right now and use that later on to create the external service. So I'm creating here now my car inventory. I select the named credential that I've created before. And now you can either give live schemas by giving the URL to the Swagger schema, or you can actually paste it here, what I'm going to do right now. So you pasted that, and then you can, on the next step, it validates your schema, and then it creates an overview of the services that it has found, the operations, and it gives a brief description about it. So in this case, we have one service that's get inventory, and it has an input of color, which is of type string. The battery range is a string, and then we get a Boolean. So that's kind of the outline of that. And what's new now in the pilot, which I'm going to talk a bit more as well, we have now the ability to support any type of nested objects as well. And so that is represented as type object. So once you've done that, you have now your new service available, and you can make use of it. So in this case, we're going to flow. And we have here some, I'm going to pray to the demo gods, so in case I have one that's already prepared. So here we have an auto launch flow. And so every flow has the start node so that you're familiar with any type of flow-based services. And you can see here on your left-hand side the palette. I'm going to choose an action. So the action is what defines things like you can send an email, you can do post to chatter, or you can have a set of custom actions that you can define in Apex itself. Or in this case, what is now new is you can now call an external service with the enhanced feature or what you already had before under the disguise of Apex, which is available today in GA. You can select an external service that is hiding under Apex action. So up to now, you could look up your external services under Apex action. Now, after the pilot, they have their own type here as external service. So that's where you can find them. And then we look here for, we have now 2 external services that we have defined, the one that I had before and then the one that I just created now. So I'm selecting that. And Flow is now inspecting that definition and letting you define the input parameters. So I have here, do I want my car to be autopiloted? Let's try. Maybe you'll be one of the first self-driving cars. And then the battery range, you can say something like, so it's like a long range. So there's a set of values defined based on the service. And then the color, you can get a value as well. So these are primitive values. They're already supported today, so there's no change there. The thing that is new now is the Apex type. So what you're doing now is I'm going to create a new resource, selecting the variable here, because I want to store the car that I found in my inventory. I'm going to name my variable car. And here is the type, which is the object that is in the schema corresponds to an Apex type. So I'm using an Apex-defined type. And within that, I have now these Apex classes that show up, which represent the response object. And as you can see, they always start with external service _. So that's a specific namespace for these types of objects. And they have the name of the service and then the object name itself appended to that. So I'm going to talk a bit more about it. So here we're choosing the inventory. And then we can select, I think I might have picked the wrong one. All right. So that should be my car. Yep, that's the one. I'm going to select that. And so the one that matches will show up now. So you will also see if it doesn't allow you to select it, that the types won't match up. So once we're done with that, we obviously have to give that a name. So we call that get inventory. And save it. And then we connect the two. So now, the start node as the first action, this is a very simple flow, does an call out like that. And has set the input parameters. You can also do through variables or any other way in flow. And then once the call out is done, it'll save it. It'll save it in the variable that we've just created. Saving it, and shortly after, you can try it out. So in the new debug window in Flow, you can now also see the detail output. So here you see car 2. I have assigned that to 200 is the response code, which is OK, and the HTTP OK value. And here you see the JSON detail of how that object looks like. And that can be any nested object. So with that, you have a quick overview to see whether your service, like you can individually test each service and make sure that they work correctly. The other thing that you can do once you've run it, you can also go to the Apex debug the console and see that your callouts actually did happen the way you expected them. So in this case, I have configured ahead of time the debug logs to be enabled for callouts that they're the finest. So in this case, this was an Aura component, which is the debug window. So we have here now the detail view of the the debug log, so it may be a bit hard to see. So we have here, you can see here now, name credential is the request. We did a named call out on MuleSoft. This was the endpoint. We got the status code 200. And we got also, when you do fine-grained, you get also the response to a certain size of the call out that just happened. So with that, you know that the call out happened. You also have the timing so that you can kind of get a feel for how well your service performs. So the kind of a sniff test on that. All right, with that, I'm going to go a bit more in detail. So just as a recap, we have first the name credential to hook up the authentication scheme and the host. Then you're registering an external service, and in the end, you create a flow to make use of that service. And now a little bit more on the schema side. So having the schema handy is useful for getting a quick look as to how you're talking to that service. So I have highlighted the areas of interest. So we have a host, which here is anypointmulesoft.com. So this is going to be on the name credential, the URL that you have to enter. On the security definitions, we know that this service only supports OAuth 2. So in this case, I have to choose OAuth 2 in the name credential. Note that since summer, we also support JOT as JOT server token and JOT bearer token exchange in a name credential, typically for server-to-server communication with Swagger-enabled services. That would be another choice there. So once you have done that, as a next step, you're tying up the operations. So the get inventory is now matching up with the get inventory external service that you're calling. And then the parameters we've seen before. So for the data type, and that's new in the pilot, there are 3 variations of objects you can have. One is the inventory at the top level. That shows up like this: external service, the service, and then the name of the object. It can also be a service that is defined under another service as an anonymous. So in this case, we have a car that is defined under in inventory. In this case, the object would show up as inventory underscore car, so that you know that this is the specific nested object defined under inventory. And then the last one is you can also have anonymous objects defined under an operation parameter, be it input, output, or what we call exception parameters, like all the 400, 300 codes. So in this specific case, we would have get inventory is the name of the operation, then in is an input parameter, and body is the body response, the body input, request for that call. So as a recap, so what are these Apex-defined dynamic data types? They are Apex, but if you look under the Apex definition, you won't see any classes. So they're dynamically generated on demand. So if Flow calls a describe code, or even if you did a describe on it, it shows up as a dynamic Apex with the name that I just mentioned before. Or if you do a call out, it's being instantiated on demand. So the benefits for that is they're all simple property type objects, so there's nothing fancy about these classes, so it's hiding that detail away from you. The other one, it's not eating into your org limit of Apex that you can define. Note also that lists are also correspondingly defined, and they show up as collections in Flow. So you would choose the collection type for Flow like that. We have on the roadmap a feature from Apex, like the code that Shintong showed before, that you could basically parse the JSON and all that yourself, but what if you could just use that Apex type to assign the variables and do the call out through an external service endpoint? So that's a feature that we're working on, and that'll be coming out in a future version. And without stealing the thunder, Shintong was gonna talk about that more in detail.
Thank you, Thomas. As Thomas talked about, I have an enhanced external service currently in pilot summer 19 release. And this pilot version, what it gives you is that it supports more complex APIs out there. In particular, it supports more complex input-output parameters. You might have nested data structures or lists of nested data structures as your input-output parameter. Behind the scene, external service automatically generate these invisible Apex-defined classes. So that describes the shape of your data so that you could just leverage them directly in Flow Builder. And for winter 20 release, we are targeting to GA the enhanced external service version in this release. In the longer term, you already seen the debuggability of the product. We allow you to see what's going on, what's the request and response inside of debug log, and we plan out to improve that experience further. In addition, today we don't yet fully support OpenAPI 2 definitions. Stuff like HTTP headers or non-JSON type of format are not being supported. So we are targeting to fill in those gaps. In addition to support OpenAPI 2.0, we are also looking out to what other industry standard there are to describe common APIs. And as a result, we would, in the longer term, support these other industry standards like OpenAPI 3.0 or REMO that is owned by MuleSoft. Next item in the pipeline, our customers love using this declarative external service call actions in Flow, but we also hear a lot of feedbacks in terms of we are developers, we want to use these actions in Apex. Or I want to set up external service once, I can not only just use it in Flow, but also in Apex, so that I set it up once, I don't need to duplicate the effort. We hear you, that's something coming up in the roadmap. Last but not least, as we are making external service more powerful and combining that with the powerful platform packaging capabilities, we're looking for our partners or API owners out there to come and build out these connectors one time and upload them as applications in AppExchange so our customers can just plug in and play by downloading an external service backed out connector from AppExchange. With that, I'm gonna lastly call out what are the actions or takeaways from today. First of all, join the pilot. If you're interested in that, talk with me after the session. We're gonna stick around outside of the room after the session. Or after the Trailhead DX, you can still talk to your account executives if you want to participate. In addition to that, if you're interested in learning more about the product, join the customer success group called External Service, or try out the Trailhead module online. And then there are a few great Flow sections to attend if you're interested in learning more. That's it. Thank you so much. Now we are opening up we have 6 more minutes, so we could take some questions. Yeah, I don't know what is the best way to get you a microphone.
Probably at the mic.
Oh, there is a map there. Awesome. Yeah, shout it out.
Are you able to access the pilot features within Scratch orgs?
Not yet. You could access the pilot features from developer edition orgs or sandboxes.
If you have to do 2 or more callouts from a particular event, there's the limit of 10 callouts from a trigger in Apex. Is that also apply for external services?
When you say 10 callouts per trigger, do you mean the long?
Like to separate endpoints, like if you had to call to multiple endpoints from the same action, would you be able to do that? Like in Apex, you would have a limit of 10 that you could do. Does that also apply in external services?
I'm actually not aware of that limit.
No,
I think you could add as many callout components as you want in one flow.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So The thing is, so the name credential basically sets the host name to which you want to go to. But you can declare as many as you want, and then you have to whitelist all those endpoints.
Okay.
But at any given point in time, I'm pretty sure in Apex also you can have, as long as they're not long running, right? If they're longer than 5 seconds, you get like, I think 10 or so.
10 max. Yeah.
10 at most that can currently run.
Right.
But there's no limit as such as to how many that you can spawn out for it. So we inherit the same underlying thing. Yeah.
Thanks.
Remember, this is for really simple business process stuff. It's not going to be running your whole API integration that you probably want to run through MuleSoft or something like that. This is, as we showed in the demo, really go there, come back, go there, come back, go there, come back.
Right. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks for the question.
Since you're defining the response model that you're getting back, if the API were to add a new field like number of seats, would that break? Would it just not provide that data back at this point?
That's a very good question. So we're looking at enhancing, so this specific case would work. So if you add a new field to it and you're not referencing it, it's just showing up but wouldn't be consumed. But we have other enhancements in store that where you wanted to rename a thing or something like that, that you could do that easier going forward. But adding new fields should be doable.
And remember, your API developer should be using good RESTful practices and in versioning their APIs. So along with this, it really means you need to talk to your API developers and really make sure that you're on the same page. It works really well if you can be talking to your API developers. If you're using an external government API, of course, you're at their mercy. So you've just got to be a little bit, careful with that. But, it really works well if you can talk to your API developers.
Yeah, great. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Great question.
I had a quick question. So I think in this use case we saw where we can call using flow. Can we call using process builders or any backend services to external services? For example, getting the credit score after I save a record.
Right now, you can only use external service actions inside a flow builder, not process builder.
Okay.
Or anywhere else in the Lightning platform. It is in our vision to actually expose external service actions to a broader platform, including process builder and Apex. Yeah, you could invoke a flow from process builder.
There's so many more benefits in using flow than in process builder. So just use process builder to invoke the flow and then build your logic, your business logic in the flow.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
2 minutes left, come on.
Yeah.
More questions can be asked.
Anyone want my email address? All right, that's it. Thank you so much for staying.
Thank you.
Talk to me if you want to learn more.